Thank you very much. Well, on that note, I'd like to bring in Professor Haroon Bhorat. I suspect South Africa is in a position to talk about good jobs and bad jobs. There is an enormous employment challenge facing your country. How are you going to tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, so the context is important. I know we press for time. South Africa has had since '94, since the end of apartheid, a national unemployment rate of about 25%, and that's excluding discouraged work seekers. So by any count of data that we have for a set of middle-income countries or even emerging market economies, widen it to developing countries, South Africa probably has the highest unemployment rate in the world. And that is a really crucial context within which to understand the South African unemployment problem. The majority of those 4.5 million workers are young people, so 70% are young people, of whom 90% have never held a job in their life before. That's crucial. So 90% of the 4 million unemployed have never worked before, which, if you look at our growth numbers, and we've had positive growth for 18 years, means that we're in effectively a middle-income country growth trap, that we do not have sufficiently high levels of economic growth of the order of a China or an India to, in fact, make any sort of inroads into the 4 million unemployed. In terms of the policy options, they're those which can deal with the problem at the margin, and these are the supply-side type policies. So if you look at closing information asymmetries in the labor market through placement services, public-private partnerships, which South Africa can and should try more of, the wage subsidy, which the Minister of Finance is currently placed for discussion, to subsidize and incentivize employers to hire young people. The schooling system doesn't provide a trustworthy signal to employers to hire young workers, inexperienced workers, and so the subsidy is an intention to override that disincentive to hire young workers. South Africa is defined by a spatial dislocation effect. So where people work relative to where jobs are means that the cost of job search is incredibly high. In that context, a transport subsidy has been mooted as a labor market policy. So interestingly, the transport subsidy has been seen as an active labor market intervention. That, though, doesn't get us out of the middle-income country growth trap issue. You need what we call game changers. You need really big, if you like, institutional and regulatory shifts that may absorb 4 million people into employment. For me, there are three that are important. One is less about labor market regulation, but more about labor market institutions. Foreign investors on our doorsteps, even in the mining industry, where we have a huge comparative advantage, view the labor market as inflexible, where in fact the analysis and the data shows that what they really mean is that the labor market institutions, the labor courts, the labor appeals courts, the dispute resolution bodies, could improve in terms of efficiency levels. So in other words, what we really need is an institutional efficiency upgrade in terms of labor market institutions. The second is product market regulation. As much as we have dominant unions, if you like, we also have very dominant employers in the South African context. So large employers, high concentration levels, anti-competitive product markets. That means, if you think about it, very little space for small businesses and the informal sector to operate in. And that's not surprising, given that South Africa, in addition to the highest unemployment rate in the world, probably on a per capita basis has one of the smallest informal sectors in the world. So we have a very small informal sector, and that sits next to a highly concentrated, vertically integrated product market space. So the game changer we're really looking at, and that's the second one, is to allow the informal sector to operate more freely in these product markets. The only way to do that is by far more stringent competition policy. And that's in US parlance, antitrust legislation, and in that way to break up these highly concentrated product markets would allow the informal sector to operate more freely. Finally, one important way to change the operation of the informal sector is through state procurement. Often we overlook that the state or the public sector is one of the largest procurers of goods and services in an economy. Yet, if you look at the data for South Africa, And I think many developing countries, the informal sector is very seldom a recipient of state tenders or state procurement. Accessing state procurement by the informal sector, which would include large numbers of these unemployed individuals, would be a game changer to grow this sector and reduce unemployment levels.
Professor Bhorat, thank you.